Rain hammered against the asphalt, turning the narrow alley into a slick, dark trap. The man sprinted, boots splashing through deep puddles, breath coming in ragged, painful hitches that burned his throat. He skidded to a halt against a brick wall, pressing his back into the cold, wet mortar. He scanned the darkness. Nothing but the rhythmic drip of a leaking pipe. Then, a metallic scraped the sound of a blade dragging across stone. He spun around. A figure stood 10 feet away, motionless, a silhouette against the dim street lamp. The man slid down the wall, hands shaking violently. He whispered, "Please." A sudden flash of steel cut the air. A dull thud echoed against the brick. Silence returned. The alley emptied as quickly as the life left the ground. The title card flickered on the screen. The Silent Strain. Inside a cramped apartment, Kofi Mensah sat inches from the television. The news reporter spoke of another unexplained killing. Kofi grabbed the remote, freezing the frame on the victim. He zoomed in until the screen pixelated. There it was, a burned circular symbol with 3 lines. He turned to his wall, covered in a web of red string connecting dozens of crime scene photos. He pinned the new photo to the corkboard and pulled a red string taut, linking it to the others. "Same mark, same method," he muttered, his jaw tightening. He stepped back, the web of string casting long, jagged shadows across his face. He knew this was no random act. At the crime scene, yellow tape fluttered in the wind. Kofi ducked under, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Medics wheeled a gurney toward an ambulance. As the sheet shifted, the symbol on the victim's neck caught the sunlight. Kofi froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. He felt a sharp prickle on the back of his neck, the distinct sensation of being observed. He whipped around, but the alley was empty. Inside the hospital, Ama Owusu adjusted the IV drip for a sweating patient. The man stared at the ceiling, eyes wide and unblinking. "You will be fine. Just stay calm," she said, her voice steady despite the erratic rhythm of the heart monitor. The patient turned his head, his gaze locking onto hers with terrifying intensity. "They are watching," the patient whispered. Ama frowned, checking the monitors for a spike. "Who is watching?" The patient leaned forward, his fingers gripping the bed rail until his knuckles turned white. "You do not see them yet." Kofi moved through the hospital corridor, his hand hovering near his pocket. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward him, elongated and unnatural under the flickering fluorescent lights. He reached the ward and saw Ama inside the room. The air felt heavy, charged with a static hum. Suddenly, the patient lunged, grabbing Ama's wrist with unnatural strength. Her fingers dug into Ama's skin, pinning her to the bedside. Kofi sprinted into the room, his boots skidding on the linoleum, but the patient's grip held fast. The monitor alarm began to shriek. The patient's grip tightened, his fingernails biting into Ama's wrist. He began to convulse, his body arching off the mattress in a rigid, unnatural bow. Machines spiked into jagged red lines, the sound of the alarm drowning out all other noise in the room. Kofi lunged forward, grabbing the patient's shoulder to pull him back, but the man was as immovable as stone. Then, the transformation took hold. The patient's pupils dilated, expanding rapidly until the iris vanished into a sea of dark, encroaching shadow. Nurses swarmed into the room, shouting, their hands fumbling with restraints and emergency syringes. Suddenly, the patient went dead still. The room fell into an eerie, suffocating silence. The nurses froze, their breaths hitching in the sudden vacuum of sound. The patient turned his head, his gaze locking directly onto Kofi with a predatory focus. His eyes were no longer human. They were pitch black, hollow voids. A nurse leaned over to check for a pulse, her hand trembling. She gasped, stumbling backward as the monitor flatlined into a long, continuous, soul-piercing tone. The hospital alarm faded into a dull, rhythmic hum. In a windowless room, dozens of screens flickered in the dark. They displayed live feeds of the hospital ward, the alleyway, and Kofi's apartment. Masked figures stood motionless in the shadows, their hands hovering over glowing keyboards. The air in the room was cold and smelled of ozone. One figure leaned forward, fingers tapping a command. A screen zoomed in on Kofi's face. the image sharpening until every pore was visible. A cursor blinked steadily over his eyes, tracking his every movement. Another screen displayed Amma, frozen in the hospital room, her pulse rate displayed as a flat, green line. The figures did not speak. They watched, recorded, and adjusted the variables. The experiment was not failing. It was progressing. On the main monitor, a progress bar reached 100%.